Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Fernandez. North Carolina law enforcement agencies are now authorized to place cameras alongside state-maintained roads to track who is driving and where, due to a provision tucked into the new state budget that essentially enables a permanent statewide surveillance program. I spoke with state government reporter Will Doran about this topic. Here's our conversation. Can you just explain the who, what, when, where, why of this program? We'll get to the why in a little bit, actually. Start with those big four.
Yes, so people have probably heard about these automated license plate readers in the past. Companies like Flock do them. We've heard a lot about Flock in North Carolina. Some cities have actually started using Flock and then quit using them. Pittsburgh and Hillsborough come to mind. I think our colleagues here at WRAL have covered those controversies quite a bit, but plenty of places are using them. But one place that these cameras have really never been allowed to be used is on the highways, which, you know, here in North Carolina, we have a whole lot of cars on the highways, and especially like I-95, major corridor, of course. And so law enforcement has really been pushing for permission to just track everybody everywhere, not just on the local city-owned streets that they've been doing or, you know, the county roads. They want these big state highways. But there's been a lot of pushback in the state legislature, and this is both on the left and the right. People who say, whoa, this is way too much. This is Big Brother. We do not need to be tracking, you know, the second-by-second location of every single person in the state, where they're going, where they're coming from. But while they did succeed in killing this for years, because this is a conversation that's been happening since way before the pandemic, they've now lost that fight. And the new state budget does authorize this just statewide, anywhere you want to put them, surveillance system.
This is artificial intelligence assisted, correct, these cameras?
Right.
So, and you mentioned kind of the long history of this program. The pilot of this program launched in 2023. Is that right? So there's been some kind of presence of this over the past few years.
Yes. Yeah. So some individual cities or like private businesses have been able to do whatever they want with these cameras. They could have put them up whenever. But in terms of actually putting them on the highways, since 2023, there's been a small pilot program. I mean, we have hundreds of law enforcement agencies here in North Carolina, and there's been 17 of them who actually have cameras up. So it's a very small sliver. But, you know, we can see some examples like Raleigh, for instance, is I believe, the biggest city that's actually participating in this program. And they have 3 cameras up. And those 3 cameras since 2023 have recorded 15 million vehicles.
Wow.
So 5 million vehicles per camera, you know, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so you need AI to, you know, in instant time, take a picture of the license plate or of the make, the model, the color of the car, and then just run it through a ton of different law enforcement databases and say, like, okay, does this miss, or, you know, does this match up with an Amber Alert we have, you know, or a missing person kind of thing? Or is this car been reported stolen? Is this a criminal suspect that, you know, we're on the lookout for, or, you know, somebody in New Jersey is on the lookout for, things like that. So these cameras take it and then instantly run it through those systems. And of those 15 million vehicles that Raleigh has tracked in the last couple of years, under 1,000 of them have come back with hits in these various databases. And so what they have done with those hits, I don't know. I've reached out to Raleigh multiple times asking for questions about this report, about the system in general. They have not responded. But, you know, have those, I think it's 951 hits, led to any arrests? Have they led to the recovery of any stolen cars? Have they led to, you know, helping find, you know, missing people? Probably at least some have, I would imagine, but we don't know if it's all of them, a majority of them, a tiny number of them. We don't know what really the success of the program has actually been.
And I mean, you're kind of hitting on here a bit of the reason, I guess, why this exists, why the SBI put in the request for this. Mm-hmm. You know, you would assume that there is a belief that it can help the public good. So is that really the primary reason given for a system like this, is to be able to keep an eye out for license plates that match with those different alerts you mentioned, any kind of criminal activity, things along those lines?
Yeah, there's been stories of, you know, elderly people with dementia who have gotten in their car and just driven away. Their family members don't know where they are. They don't know where they are. But agencies have been able to use these cameras to find them and, potentially save their lives. There's also a case that the SBI flagged in a report to lawmakers asking for this, where they said, hey, one of our agencies got a tip that someone was driving down to North Carolina from up north with a shipment of fentanyl to sell down here. And because of flock cameras, we were able to catch them. I think it was like within 5 minutes of them crossing the state line into North Carolina. And they found the drugs in the car. They weren't able to sell it, got the drugs off the streets. There's also been cases, there was a woman who was being investigated for murder. She was a prime suspect in a murder case. She told the cops her alibi. They weren't really sure whether or not to believe it, but then they went back and looked in the flock system, and sure enough, she was where she said she was because they were able to use these cameras and figure that out. So, they've pointed to these success stories of saying, like, look, this can help catch bad guys. It can help clear innocent people, and help cops, focus their investigations better. It's needed. What the SBI didn't mention is the negatives to this program. For instance, in Fayetteville recently, there was a woman who was arrested, really aggressively questioned as a criminal suspect. Turns out the camera just got her license plate wrong.
Oh.
Because sometimes you're driving and it's raining or it's at night or you're at a weird angle. And so the camera thought her license plate was one person. It wasn't. It just got it wrong. But the cops didn't figure that out. They just went and arrested her anyways, and then eventually had to pay her tens of thousands of dollars. The police chief gave her a written apology. It was a whole issue. And there's been reports. There's a group called the Institute for Justice that's a big national firm, and it has found dozens of cases of specifically police officers being caught using this to stalk their ex-girlfriends, their current girlfriends, potential romantic interests. And they note that in a lot of cases, it's not the actual agencies that are catching these people because there aren't policies in place to actually catch them. It's just the victims of the stalking figuring out that this is what happened and then reporting it on up. So, while they've identified a couple dozen, there's likely even more that's happening.
I mean, so those are some of the negatives for sure with a system like this. You mentioned the one organization. Are there other organizations that have kind of voiced their concern with this? And what really are those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, just even within the state legislature, we've had some kind of more libertarian-minded Republicans who tried for years to kill this. Democrats have raised civil liberties concerns. The American Civil Liberties Union is another group. I spoke with them for this article. They're focused now on basically just trying to tweak the laws that we have. They didn't want it in place at all. They've lost that battle, but they said, okay, there are changes we can make. For instance, like, when you're driving, one of these cameras, tracks your license plate. Under state law right now, they can hold that for 90 days. Well, the ACLU tells me it doesn't need to be 90 days. In New Hampshire, their rule is 3 minutes.
Oh. And
if it doesn't hit in a database within the first 3 minutes of you getting recorded, it gets automatically deleted.
Wow.
So, they're saying if, look, there's a lot more potential for abuse if we're holding on to this stuff for months. But on the other hand, like that lady who was accused of murder and then they were able to go back and find her alibi. If that had gotten deleted after 3 minutes, she might, have still been under investigation and even been, falsely accused of committing a murder. So there's pros and cons to every single part of this, and every single argument has a counter argument on both sides. It's a really complex issue.
There's a lot of gray. Who would have thought? Will, you talked a bit about what some of these organizations are trying to put out there, trying to make adjustments to all of this. Are there safeguards in place, like right now, like at this moment, for a system like this?
No.
Oh, okay.
Great. Yeah, right? Isn't that what you wanted to hear?
Yeah.
Mass surveillance, there are essentially no rules for how this works in North Carolina. It just says there's nothing saying how this technology should or shouldn't be used, really. It says that police agencies should have a policy to have these cameras, but like what should be in that policy, what shouldn't be in that policy, there's no guidance on that from the state. It is completely up to the individual agency. And some of them take some of these concerns from these civil rights groups seriously, some do not. I looked through the policies of 30-plus agencies, and Raleigh and Asheville have policies that say, don't surveil people based on their religion. Don't just go park outside of, a church or a mosque or whatever and just see who's attending there. Don't surveil people based on their race. Don't, surveil political rallies or protests unless it's part of a separate ongoing criminal investigation. But that's just 2 agencies. And like I said, I looked at 32. The other 30 had nothing like that.
Oh.
And some of them say, okay, for, when an officer requests to get the footage, some of them say that a supervisor has to sign off on that beforehand. Some of them say that a supervisor has to review it after the fact to make sure that there was no abuse of the system happening. And some of them don't say anything at all. They just say the officers can download it. So there's, lots of different philosophies there as well. And so it's really kind of the Wild West right now in terms of these policies. And that's something that some of these critics are now focused on. Okay, we've lost the fight. This is happening. But, the safeguards in place are basically non-existent. Some agencies do a better job than others, but we need to kind of get some best practices out there is what I'm hearing from some of the advocate groups.
Is there a timeline for when these cameras would be put up or anything along those lines yet?
You can start doing it right now. As soon as the state budget became law, this was legal. So, it's not like the government has their own cameras. They typically contract out with companies like Flock, who's really kind of the biggest one, but there's a dozen or more companies in this space. And so now probably what we're seeing is, cities, counties who are interested in doing this are, reaching out to those companies saying, hey, send us your bids. And then, so, we know that some cameras are already up and running, and probably, within the coming months, we'll see a lot more.
And anything about these cameras, this system, the reasons why that I have failed to mention that you'd like to add?
No, it's really been a long time coming here in North Carolina. I spoke with Senate Leader Phil Berger, Speaker of the House Destin Hall, because they've both been around for all of these fights in the legislature. I mean, like I said, they've been going back
years.
And they've heard from all of their fellow Republicans who are raising serious concerns about, big government overreach on this. And they said, look, we hear you. We're going to try to be careful on this, but it's just necessary for public safety. This is the way of the world now. AI is everywhere. Cameras are everywhere. And it's true. When you go out in public, you do not have a right to privacy if you're in public. You or I could take a photograph of anybody in public, and that's a First Amendment protected activity. So, of course, this is scaling that up by millions,
right,
and millions and millions and millions. But it is still, you're in public. You don't have an expectation of privacy. And so, their argument is let's just do what we can to protect public safety, catch bad guys, recover stolen cars, find missing people. The good outweighs the bad.
It sounds like this is going to be a story that this is not going to be the last time we're going to be talking about
absolutely
this.
Not,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Not the last time you're going to be sitting there in that seat talking about this. State government reporter Will Doran, thank you so much for being here, Will. Appreciate
it.
Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Find the latest North Carolina news on our YouTube page. Just search WRAL. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.